Welcome to Phil and Ted's Sexy Boomer Show. I'm Ted Bunnett.
I'm Phil Proctor. I can hardly believe I'm actually here, but that's every day, actually. And we have a very wonderful guest who I have a good history with, Bob Wayne, the creator of Big Daddy. Yeah? Co-creator of Big Daddy.
Yes.
And the owner of the Sunburst Studios in Culver City, where Firesign Theatre did 2 of our albums?
3.
Yeah.
3
but who's
albums.
counting? Yeah, we did the trilogy for Rhino.
That's right.
But before all that...
I saw, by chance, a documentary a couple of days ago called Drop Dead City. And great title.
Yeah.
And it's a riff off of the very famous Daily News header from New York in 1975, Ford to City, drop dead in the middle of the financial crisis.
David Letterman made a lot of fun with that.
I remember it really well. I was just out of high school in 74, and I was starting my career in journalism, and I was in New York in 75, 76. Yep. And I lovingly refer to it as the bad old days when New York was down and out. And anyway, this wonderful film chronicles this crisis that the city managed. But wow, what a story.
It's really a story that hasn't been told before.
No. And it's playing at the Laemmle theaters here in town this week. So we wanted to have the filmmakers with us, Peter Yost and Michael Rohatyn. Do I have that correct?
Yeah, I say Rohatyn. My dad said Rohatyn. It's not a very interesting story.
You say Rohatyn, and I say Rohatyn.
There we go.
Thank you guys so much for jumping on with us so quickly and unannounced. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having us.
Like I said, had a chance to watch the film, and who would have thought crunching the books and a city budget would be so dramatically compelling?
We tried our best.
Well, you did well. And it's been a big hit in the city, evidently, in New York. Wow, you even had Chuck Schumer attend. That must have been...
Yeah. We're held over for the 5th week at the IFC cinemas in New York City, and we're kind of going around to other places. Yeah, it's been pretty amazing.
What's the response from the New Yorkers who are seeing this? What are you hearing?
It's been pretty remarkable, as Michael said. On the face of it, you would think a fiscal crisis documentary. No, thank you. But it's literally been selling out, much to our surprise and the surprise of many people.
Yeah.
It's kind of caught fire. And I think it's a combination. People who have a direct connection to New York literally find themselves in the movie sometimes, or their parents. There's like a fascination with 70s New York, I think, as well.
Oh,
just
absolutely.
the fashion, the hair, and all that stuff. And I think it's present-day relevance at a time where, with Doge and all that's happening between local governments and the federal government, it's super relevant, what was happening then. And then, for example, in your neck of the woods, all the budget crises that are happening around Los Angeles elsewhere makes it, straight out of the headlines. And so it's really genuinely entertaining, but it's also instructive to inform what's going on in people's daily lives.
It is fantastic to see New York again back in the mid-'70s, which was not exactly attractive. It wasn't exactly what you would call tourist material.
No, I remember.
It was just...
Procter & Bergman were touring in New York then, and it had a distinctively stinky feeling to it.
It was not only a distinctly stinky feeling, but you could park on the street and go to CBGB's, and it was not a problem, because it all looked like CBGB's back then.
That's true.
I mean, seeing some of the trash in the streets, and it was like, oh, yeah. But you know what?
Not to mention the garbage.
Hey.
So, yeah, he's here all hour, folks.
I grew up in New York.
Let's tell the story, why this is so fascinating. In a nutshell, Mayor Abe Beame took over for John Lindsay. The city had prided itself for its liberal leanings towards free schooling at the city college and free medical care, which was not unique to New York. I remember San Francisco, California had free medical care back in those days.
Those loonies.
We were almost acting like a respectable Western democracy. And then it turned out that there was a shortage of money when Abe Beame took over. First of all, they found out that something wasn't adding up, and they estimated the city initially was like $2 billion in debt, which is a lot of money in 1975. It's a lot of money today. But then they found a closet somewhere, I don't know where it was, in City Hall or where, they found a closet full of canceled checks that were never put in the books. And so now the estimate of the crunch was something like $6 billion, which is close to double that in today's dollars. And then antics ensued.
Well, the canceled checks were just one example of a total dysfunction in the way that the city ran its books. And the fact was that the banks were willing to lend the city up until the moment when that fact of the New York City of the accounting became public, and then suddenly the ability of the city to raise money just for its operating costs dried up instantly. And there's a scene in our film where you watch this happen. There was a little tin box where the banks would put their bids for the latest issuance of a bond, and they did not receive any bids. Oh. And at that moment, the city had no access to financing. Just sort of like being blind and broke and scared out of your wits, on a very relentlessly moving locomotive, because the city of New York every week had to pay its obligations to its employees.
Wow.
The fascinating thing was they were issuing bonds they were getting to the point where they were selling bonds on anticipated revenue.
Yes, right.
And it became sort of a confidence game, and someone blew the whistle, right? And that was sort of the end of it. And that's when the crash happened, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar to the mortgage crisis of trying to package risk under various names, or revenue streams that are sourced from kind of new instruments, new ideas. And in our story, and Peter should speak also. I don't want to just yak away, but in our story, Nelson Rockefeller, who was the Republican governor of New York State, we really focused on him as having been instrumental in that happening, and which is kind of partly where I think our movie, we tried to find the interesting things in this, very granular story. The Lindsay idea had already been covered, and it's well known that Lindsay was a very ambitious liberal.
Yep.
But without Rockefeller, Lindsay would have had nothing to play with. So we aimed our sights. That's
a uniqueness to New York State, right? I mean, the state has a lot of control over the city. They run the MTA, the transit. They do pull the strings, don't they? Generally.
Absolutely. Yeah. The city can't levy its own taxes. It has to go to the state for that.
Wow.
And now I understand that you guys put this all together from 16 millimeter archival footage, actual footage of the events. And then you've also been interviewing some of the players.
Yeah.
Oh, not just some of them, but it was a labor of love for us both. But I think especially for Michael. I mean, we were at this in varying degrees for the better part of a decade. But the more that we got into it, it's a complicated story, and to tell something effectively and simply takes a lot of work.
Sure.
And also, as you suggest, the archive was incredible. We ended up interviewing and including in the film between 35 and 40 people.
Oh, my goodness.
Were main players, many of whom I would almost dare say, unfortunately, even the majority of whom might not still be with us today, but who were actively involved back then. And we caught their stories and wove them together, and the footage was just remarkable. It's the idea was to bring together the city and make it a character. And as you said, it was 16 millimeter. This was essentially the last year or so when the local news, or when the news media, shot on film. Soon after, they moved to video. And not to be a snooty film person about this, but I think it would be a much less kind of engaging filmic experience.
Less emotional. I know.
It was on video. Yeah, you go there and it looks kind of like a movie, God save us.
Then the twist comes when the city is desperate and tries to get help from Washington, D.C. President Ford said no. And he got that advice from guess who?
Robert
Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney.
Dick Cheney!
Who were
the dark side.
The dark side even back then. And that can be argued that cost Ford his reelection, even though he tried to come back around. What was interesting, Michael, your father is portrayed in the movie as really sort of the white knight that comes in and can talk to all these hostile adversaries, the police union, the fire department, the teachers union, my God, and all these conflicting agencies who didn't want to compromise or felt they were being taken advantage of in the situation. And it was your father who was brought in. Tell us about that.
Well, my father was, in those days, being an investment banker was a much more low-key thing than it is now. And he was in business. He was very good at structuring and restructuring distressed companies and this kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And the governor asked him if he could just take a look at this problem. The governor was a rookie also, first-term governor, and arrived completely blindsided.
Hugh Carey.
Hugh Carey, sorry. And looked around for a Democrat on Wall Street, and there weren't many. And I think he found my father. And my father, I mean, the story is, and I tell it, I repeat it because I think it's true. He was on jury duty, and he said, if you get me off jury duty, I'll look at, whatever you have, thinking this is just for a couple of weeks.
Oh.
And lo and behold, it was, it was a really important part of his life. I would say that, he was appointed. This is an example that nobody could possibly want, which is where like an appointed board of individuals have authority over the financial activities of a huge population in a liberal democracy. Yeah. It's not supposed to happen. And I think it happened that my father revered FDR and really believed in government. And so there was trust right away in almost every corner of the story that he was somebody who was not going to, who was going to speak truthfully. He was actually very good at communicating. And he loved it. He became lifelong friends with a bunch of these labor, Victor Gottbaum, a bunch of these kind of titans of labor. And it was really a surprise turn for him, but it really marked an important part of his life.
Well, you can see all this at the Lemley Theatre tonight. And I do have to say, this sounds very much like something that would be wonderful to watch on television, on Netflix or PBS. And this sounds, like something I think people would be fascinated by in a mass showing. So,
if you can sell out movie theaters, and at this point,
you're on your way, boys.
Part of our story is that we don't have distribution, and we have not been sort of like able to transition to PBS or to these streamers. So
not yet.
Right now we're really amazed and thrilled that we're getting attention, and audiences are still going to the movies and going to our film.
Mm-hmm. Great.
But you're opening a door there that we would love to go through. But
it's
been. But the plan is for us to be online streaming one way or another by the middle of the summer. So
all right.
There's a website, and it'll be available. Peter, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's fine. No, there's some satisfaction, and I think it's appropriate to the story that it's not being embraced from the beginning by the usual distribution subjects, that it's a little bit outside the mainstream system.
Yeah.
And then once it's out there, people are literally flocking to it. And so there's a little pleasure to be had in watching it succeed outside of the normal channels.
It's also the backdrop of the times. I mean, that was the mid-'70s. It was in the middle of white flight, which probably was well underway by then, from the cities. The tax base was diminishing. The city was in total transition at this point. You wouldn't recognize New York today from New York then. The banks were pretty harsh with New York, and maybe deservedly so to some degree, because it looked like there was a lot of fiscal mismanagement. When you look at New York then and New York now, what do you see the differences are?
Oh, wow. I mean, can I go, Peter?
Go for that, Michael. Yeah.
Part of, for me, this film, and I think many people, is the nostalgia for a period in New York City that was not as hyped up as it is now. And there absolutely let's just say there's a diversity of opinions about whether New York is better now than then.
Yeah.
I think for many people who really didn't have a lot going on, New York in '75 was an amazing place. You could get cheap rent, and you could you could experiment, which is why punk rock and the art scene, all these things flourished. I think now we live in a city that is a little bit the creature of one idea of success, and that is success built around money and prosperity. And I don't know how you do it, how you retain diversity, or how you. But I do think New York now is really a very different place.
You made a good point. It's more self-conscious now, I think, in a way, because back then it was just it was a big small town. You'd run into people on the subway you knew. It had this really extraordinary thing, and had distinct neighborhoods, and it was still very World War II oriented in terms of immigrants. And it, to me, and maybe I always kept thinking it was because I was young and the world was new to me, but I think New York was far more interesting.
New York is an amazing place, and what it does every day is mind-blowing. It's
Really?
just
Yes.
kind of. I do want to say one thing about small town then versus now, which is that we really were struck that in those days the banks were local. Those are huge. What is now a multinational bank.
Yes.
In those days was First National City Bank, was a New York City bank.
Hey, it's a wonderful life.
Bankers Trust.
Right?
Right, and so they actually, certainly the bankers misbehaved and were, cynical in
Naughty.
the way that they were
Yeah.
making fees off of stuff that was totally not, good, paper, so to speak. But they did feel an identity and a connection to this city, and I think that was really a big part of the story.
Yeah.
And I think it was also a time when news was very different. We use newscasters a fair bit throughout the film to help us tell this story, and they were on the ground, of course, and in the middle of it. And there were only so many of these guys, mostly guys, a few women, and they were known by everybody locally, and they were known by the political players, and there weren't 1,000 or 1 million Instagram channels or ways of getting your message out. And so there was a directness, and dare I say, not to be naive about this, because people were self-interested and occasionally spinning things, as people do, but there was a directness and an almost honesty to the engagement between the subjects that you see in the film, the politicians, the union leaders, the et cetera, and the news media. When they didn't have money, they would turn to the camera. Part of it was the time as well, 1975, before people were used to cameras and spinning things. There was a directness. You would say, does the city have money? No, we're out of money.
Yep.
Yeah.
How much, and a number of people who have seen the film have been struck by that, and how the world of communications and media has shifted so much. Nobody
And
will just come out
honesty.
and say anything anymore. Yeah, and so these news people also, we're going to interview you again tomorrow, and they all lived in the city, just
Yep.
as Michael
Gabe
was saying.
Pressman.
The banks were local.
Gabe Pressman,
Yeah, Gabe
right.
Pressman is in the film.
God, he
Exactly.
interviewed me
And-
when I was a kid. I was like 7 years old, and I was at the Thanksgiving parade. And he came down, and he interviewed me, and we ran
Did
home.
you have a gun?
No, but I ran home. We were sitting around the Thanksgiving dinner table. It was our waiting to see Teddy on television. He cut me.
Oh.
Cut me on the phone.
Well, I'm surprised we didn't get you in our footage, because basically most of our footage was stuff that was cut and not used.
Boy, I'll bet.
I could watch that for hours. Peter Yost, Michael Rahatton, your film Drop Dead City, the fascinating story of New York's financial crisis in the mid-'70s and what really defined the character of the greatest city on earth. Gentlemen, thank you. Good luck with the movie.
Also, please, anyone listening, the website, Drop Dead City, the movie, everything is on there, and more. We have a little section about tell us your story of New York in 1975, and,
Thanks so much for coming on the show.
thank you.
Appreciate
Okay, take care.
Thank you.
And speaking of reels of film, we're now going to be transitioning to reels of sound.
You're listening to Phil and Ted's Sexy Boomer Show. I'm Ted Bonnet.
I'm Phil Proctor, and our guest in studio is Bob Wayne. Hi, Bob.
Hello, how are you, Phil?
I'm
Ted.
feeling
Hey,
good.
Bob, nice to see
All
you.
is
Yeah.
good. And the title of your book is called Reel to Reel. That's REEL to REAL, or REAL, I
Correct.
should say. Reel to Reel Tales.
Yes,
Okay.
that is correct.
Now, how did you get into the sound industry?
Well, I have an MBA from UCLA. Got out of school, decided I did not want to go into a straight business background. My dad was a singer,
Oh.
and he sang in the big band era in the 30s, and I used to go watch him perform occasionally, and
Oh, how
of course,
great.
and it was something that was in the back of my mind. And when I got out of my MBA program, I started working at Preview House, which you probably know was
Yeah,
a
it's still there.
Yeah, it's now called Melody something.
But it's on Sunset.
It's on Sunset, yeah. And it was
I went
a
to
record
church there for a while, by the way. Church of the Science of Mind.
at Preview House.
Yep, at Preview
Wow.
House.
Did you turn the dials up and down to based upon the sermon?
Yeah, Preview House, for folks who don't know, was a place where they would test films and television shows.
Yes.
And each person sat in a chair where they could manipulate a dial to tell whether they were interested or not interested,
Correct.
or what have you.
And they also had finger sensors, and they measured
little later, yeah, right.
galvanic skin response. Unfortunately, nobody knew what that meant. They didn't know whether that meant you enjoyed the program or you disliked it.
Oh, yeah, but they had a record.
They had a record of it, and they said, well, something's happening here. They didn't know what it was.
What it is, that's exactly clear. Right.
Yeah. So I started working in record testing, which was founded there by a guy named Larry Heller, who was a manager he was road manager for the Turtles. And he was involved in the music business, and he got in there to start testing records. And so I was involved with that, and we tested a lot of stuff for Arista with Clive Davis back in the early days. And I spent a couple years there, and my job was to put together the test tape, which meant I edited together the analog quarter-inch tapes, and I put little foil sensors on because we had the lyrics broadcast on the screen so people could see the lyrics while they were listening to the songs. And they were Saturday mornings.
I wish
with
everybody
young
did
kids.
that.
Yeah. Well, now it's just one line over and over again, I think, isn't it? But that was a lot of fun, and I kind of got my feet wet. And then me and my partner, Richard McAndrew, we decided we would open a small studio. And that's
Wow.
kind of how it started, with a little
Now, was
four-track.
your studio in Century City, or where?
No, my studio originally was in my parents' house,
Okay.
which was a little difficult because it was fine for maybe a couple months, but the first session that my dad disliked the repetitiveness of the vocals going over and over again at 3 o'clock in the morning, he said, I think your studio needs to go. So we moved it to a garage in Westchester. Near the airport. That was a bit of a problem.
Oh, that would be with the planes going around.
We had to do takes between airplanes landing.
Which were very loud back then.
Very loud.
Ted and I know that because when we started this show during COVID, we would broadcast, often interview people outside in their backyard, and here in L.A.,
We were convinced that the air traffic control routed planes over wherever they found where we were at.
we
There you go.
did a lot of editing.
Oh yeah, and it can. Right, and of course, when you do some chop edits in those, sometimes it's perfectly silent, and then all of a sudden you hear that noise, and it's really apparent.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
I moved to Culver City in a real studio, and I built it basically myself, designed it myself.
It was a great studio.
And that is the studio that Firesign Theatre
Yeah.
did 3 albums in.
Very comfortable studio.
Yeah.
We even did some recording in the street outside. Okay, during
That's
City
right.
of
The man on
Mortality.
the street was you out near the
That's
street
right.
with a long cable.
Randy Pandit or something. I can't remember.
Yes,
That's right.
that's right.
So you did 3 albums with the Firesign
Yes.
Theatre. What was that like creatively to deal with those guys? Because, I've had, I have friendships with, well, certainly 3 of them. This guy,
Yeah.
Peter was a business partner, and David Osman actually officiated my wedding. But I interviewed
Mine
him
too.
back in the 70s when he was running for president, Papoon. So this goes back.
Papoon.
So I knew
Dave
these.
Osman
I
as
knew these
Papoon.
gentlemen. But when I came over, the only time I ever saw the Firesign perform on record was Boom Dot Bust.
Right.
And man, the energy between the 4 of these strong personalities was
Fiery.
Was less than comfortable
Yeah, there were times, but
at times.
Sparks.
Yeah.
Fortunately, it rarely involved me directly.
Right.
Although the first day we did recording, Phil Proctor decided he was going to rummage around the studio and find materials
For
to
sound
use
effects?
for Foley.
Yeah,
That's
for Foley.
right.
I was known as Darth Foley.
Yeah, and I heard noises coming from above the control room, and I said to Phil Austin, "Where is Proctor?" And he said he's above the control room finding stuff, and I said, some of those areas are not supported properly, and he might end up falling through.
Wow, that'd be great sound.
Oh yeah, and Austin says, perfect. We'll just leave him there, and we'll continue on.
I never heard that story. That's funny.
So it's in the book.
It's in the book.
It's in the book.
It's
Yes,
a
it
beautiful book, ladies and gentlemen. It is. It's a hardbound copy.
Hold it up to the microphone.
I am, because it's heavy. It's a heavy book, and it's profusely illustrated.
Yes.
Like my book is. Where's my fortune cookie? But this one has
And Bill Plimpton did your cover.
wonderful
Bill
artwork.
Plimpton. Bill Plimpton did the caricature on the front. I've known
Which is
Bill
you
for
with
a
3
while.
heads.
That's correct. And can you figure out what the 3 heads are? Hopefully.
Wow.
Well, one is your singing
That's
persona.
right. That's my
One is
career.
your cool studio cat.
Right.
And
Your
the,
cat.
and the other one is headphones, just a genial studio owner.
God, you're right on. That's a studio owner, producer. The other one's the
with the
engineer.
shades.
Yeah, and then the third one is
So,
me and Big Daddy.
Bill
my
Plimpton
band.
would-
I met him through a roundabout way through my girlfriend at the time, Regina. Hi, Regina, you're listening. Her cousin knew him from Portland. I believe he's from the Portland area. And we were up there and saw an illustrated book of his. And I looked at it and I said, this is fantastic. I didn't know who he was, but I thought, these are just amazing illustrations. He says, you think that's great? Check out these films. And he put on Hair High, which was one of his movies.
Hair High?
Hair High.
High.
And it's really a great movie, and I was just transfixed with it. And so I called him up and told him about the band and said we'd like to work with him and this and that. So the idea was to work with him on a film, that he would animate a film. That is still kind of in the works. But in the interim, I asked him if he would do a couple illustrations for the book. There's another one on the, you can look at, I think it's
I'm looking at
Yeah,
your back cover, the people you've worked with, Steve Allen.
a lot of people.
Hal Blaine,
Yeah,
the drummer and member of the Wrecking Crew. The Monkees, Micky Dolenz.
yes, I did 2 albums with Harold Bronson and Micky, and that was a joy because he was great to work with. He was absolutely wonderful.
He's a nice guy.
Nice guy, and his singing was great. He was really on key all the time. Took direction really well because I produced the record and
Yeah.
engineered it
Yeah.
with Harold, and it was a great experience.
Okay, we should mention a couple of things. He's referring to Harold Bronson and his partner
Richard Foos.
Richard Foos, right.
I think Harold's been on our show before.
Yes.
Of Rhino Records, they started as like record pirates, and then created a wonderful outlet for a great comedy and music on their own, which they sold, I think, to Warner Brothers or something like that. But anyway, that's that background.
Yeah. Yeah.
And your musical background is that you co-created Big
Big
Daddy.
Daddy, which is a 50s parody band.
Yeah, it's
still
amazing.
around today and still getting airplay on Instagram and still
Well deserved.
yeah, it's been an interesting ride. We had the live band around for many years. Actually had a hit record.
How many
on
pieces? What was it made
8
of?
piece.
8 piece.
8 piece, and we did a lot of touring. We had a hit record in England on our first album,
So cool.
which was 1985. It was our version of Springsteen's "Dancing in the Dark," but we did it like Pat Boone. We did it like Moody River. It kind of harks to the piano part, if anybody knows that song, the beginning of Moody River. And we did a lot of touring in England. We toured Australia.
No kidding.
We went all over, and we did 6 albums.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
we're still out there. Although, purists don't always like what we do to the songs. 'cause
Making fun of things, huh?
They look at it sometimes some of them love it and some hate it. We had one guy when we played at the Palomino, which was a very famous
nice
club
club.
here in the Valley. And,
Nice club.
And the guy, after the show, came up to us and said, I've never seen so much talent on one stage. And he paused and says, wasted.
Nice.
And he said, why don't you just do the old songs the way they're supposed to be done
for heaven's
and do
sake.
the new songs the way they're supposed to be done?
And you said, hey, thanks for coming up. Yeah.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
It takes a pretty big temperament or good temperament, I should say, to work with such diverse artists. I mean, yes, most famous, successful people are at peace and very pleasant and nice to meet and talk to. But
other than the Firesign Theatre.
other than those guys.
That's
right.
What are your horror stories?
But working with people, when it's on the line for them, you're getting into artistic temperament. And now they're relying on you to make them sound good.
Right. And nowadays you can, but back in the day you couldn't. You didn't have pitch shifters. You didn't have time adjustments. So if they were behind the beat or ahead of the beat, you got to just do another take and hope they can do it better. So it was a question of multiple takes as opposed to manipulating a digital waveform.
So maybe you could tell us the most lovely, of course,
Firesign Theatre,
exception.
of course.
Besides the Firesign Theatre.
Besides the most lovely experience and the most miserable
Heinous.
experience.
Well, the most lovely experience, I have two. So one was Richie Havens, working with Richie Havens, who was just a phenomenal person.
Yeah.
Everything about him when he walked in, he just was this peaceful, wonderful guy with this big smile. And that was incredible. It was just me and him and a bass player. And that was
And
really
that kind of
fun.
energy pays off because it just pushes the session into a really great place.
Yeah, and we did a remake of The Streets of Philadelphia, with another Springsteen song, and it appeared on Rhino's Academy Award box set because they couldn't license the Springsteen version. And this version, I must say, it's just absolutely phenomenal version of the song. He absolutely just
He really
killed
is
it.
something, isn't
He
he?
just killed it. So if anybody you can go on the internet and hear it, and it's a spectacular vocal. It's just chilling, absolutely chilling.
So that was good.
Yeah.
Now,
And now for clicks.
Oh, wait a minute.
Tell us-
No, and also
Another one.
Steve Allen.
I was
did
gonna
have
ask you
Steve
about
Allen.
that. What did
yeah.
you do with Steve?
Well, we were supposed to work on a Rhino project, and he came in and he recorded. It was also kind of a Big Daddy thing we were doing, kind of grunge rock. And he said he would do one of those songs and sing. He wasn't really much of a singer, but he was a great piano player.
Yes, he
and
sure
a
was. And a
funny
songwriter.
guy. And a songwriter. Great
Prolific songwriter.
Yeah, and an amazingly nice man. Just we sat there mostly and just talked about old TV because I said,
we had the same Firesign Theatre. I think it was Phil and Pete and I had the opportunity to work with Steve on an NPR special about, I don't know, the history of comedy or something. I also did a television show with Steve.
wasn't he something? He was just
He was
a
an
great
amazing
guy.
He used to walk around with a little tape recorder, and he'd have ideas all the time.
Yeah.
And he'd just take a second and read the idea and everything. And he'd give it to his secretary, and she'd type him up, and there was the idea for a song or whatever. But he was a gentleman.
I met him at a UFO conference down by LAX. At the
Really?
airport, yeah. It was this obscure kind of UFO conference, and I came out of one presentation, and I look over, and sitting by himself, taking notes, Steve Allen. I just couldn't help myself, so I went over, and he was so open and receptive. So we started talking about UFOs,
Amazing guy.
and he was just totally straight and regular.
Well,
and
I have another
lovely.
funny story about Steve that somebody else told me. He was eating at a restaurant, and there was Steve Allen eating by himself. And so he invited Steve over to his table with a bunch of other people. And all that Steve did was eat his meal and leave.
Okay, so now heinous.
Heinous.
Yeah, what was your most heinous studio experience?
There's been many. I actually have a whole chapter of crazy things, but probably gosh, I don't know. There's so many of them.
Hard
Oh,
to
you go ahead
find
and
the
dig.
worst.
We're talking to Bob Wayne, his new book, Reel to Reel Tales, who is a recording engineer extraordinaire who worked with a lot of people in the business, and now we're asking him,
Producers.
as a producer with your own recording studio, having a client come in, who was the worst?
Okay. Well, I would say probably this last one.
He's actually
The
looking for
Devil
his book.
Woman versus Mr. Motown, just plain creepy. This was a guy who did a not a seance. What do you call it?
Possession?
Yeah, possession. We recorded it.
An exorcism
yeah, it was
possession?
kind of like an exorcism.
Nice.
And this guy came in initially. I'd worked with him a few times, and he was always talking about the fact that he gave up working for Motown to work for the Lord. He says, and all his great songs that Berry Gordy wanted, unfortunately, he couldn't give it to him because he had to work for the Lord. And then one time he came in with some of his daughters who would accompany him, and one of the women from his church, and he said, "We're going to do an exorcism." And I said, "Oh, okay."
Really?
And I thought he was kidding.
Exorcism in your daily life.
Yeah.
Firesign skit.
So he put her in the room, and she started talking in tongues and making all these weird sounds.
no.
And he was in there with her, and I just was like, okay, when is this going to be over?
Wow.
And it was pretty strange. And then it was, a voice came out of her body that sounded completely different than her normal voice. And she looked like totally different. She's a hell of a good actress.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
I'm not a believer, as you can tell.
Now, what kind of so the record was going to be an exorcism, or were they doing this for their own?
Yeah,
personal?
they never said it was going to be on a record. I think they used it in their church
That
to
makes
say,
sense.
"Beware."
Yeah.
God.
This could happen.
One of the
Yes.
first sampling albums ever, which was Life in the Bush of Ghosts with Brian Eno and David Byrne. And what they did is they took samples of audio recordings. It was really sort of the breakthrough album for this genre. And
stuff.
and they had an exorcism that was recorded in Africa, I think it was. No, it was English, though. It was an English exorcism. But anyway, they put a beat to it. And what the heck was the name of that? The cut. Anyway, Life.
So they made loops. They made like loops of the sound.
No. They
was it somebody get me out of here? Said the
No, it was a priest. There was a priest doing the actual exorcism, and you hear the subject breathing heavily and coming out of it, and it's if you check out that record, Life in the Bush of Ghosts. I think it's the last
Brian
cut. Brian Eno and David Byrne.
So that was the most difficult and weirdest.
Yeah, that was probably one of the weirdest. Yeah.
Besides the Firesign Theatre.
Yeah, but I mean, there's a lot of people that come in that want you to make them sound great, and you can't. And if you can't, you're the bad guy, and that's an unfortunate deal because you got to make money. You got to keep the doors open.
Yeah,
and opening a commercial studio is not the easiest thing. And hopefully, the book shows that. It shows the highs and lows, and it's not all glamour.
How many years did you have the studio before it was gentrified out of your hands?
I had it for 30 years in the Jefferson location.
Yeah,
and
that's in Culver City.
Right, and about 6 months in my parents' house before we were kicked out, and a couple years in Westchester.
33 and a third years.
Yeah, 33 and a third, and then and that's it. So then my band got back together again. We did a Kickstarter program. We did a new record. There was no Rhino Records to put it on anymore.
Yeah.
So Richard Foose put it on.
Bless his heart.
An independent label. It did what it did. It just wasn't quite the same anymore.
Well, that's just it. It's sort of a bygone era, the whole thing of having a studio like you've had and the kind of content you produced, because we call it content now.
Yeah, everyone does it themselves now.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's unrecognizable, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I kind of started to learn Pro Tools a little bit and Logic, and I enjoy it, but I couldn't see doing it 8 hours a day in a commercial situation. It would drive me nuts to be staring at a screen and manipulating data.
It's
for
the
me,
same.
it was,
It's the same in voiceovers now.
Right.
When you go to the studio,
But the precision.
clinical. It's clinical.
Well,
in many
Firesign.
ways.
These guys would get in a room. I would baffle them off, and they would just go. And and then when it got to the end of a section, we would stop. We'd listen. Either good or bad. It was very little punch-ins.
No.
And then they would listen to this was a tough thing.
Punching in is a term where you go back and just punch in a re-recorded segment that you want to go over.
Right. We wouldn't do a lot of punch-ins, but what they did want to do, which of course drove me nuts, they wanted to hear the end of a section. We would do it in chronological order. They'd want to hear the end and then start the next section immediately, which meant I had to get them ready and record them. Boom. I go from playback to record, and sometimes all at different times, all 4 mics at different times. So it was a little challenging.
Oh, what a
Yeah.
bunch of crazy guys.
Yeah,
4 or
but
5 crazy guys.
it was so much fun.
It was familiar.
Yeah.
All of that stuff. Every studio that we got to work in was a playground.
Yeah.
And we immediately would establish a personal relationship with our engineer or our producer, so that we were a family working together
Yeah,
to
it
attain
was
a
always
certain
great. They'd come
goal.
in. I remember you guys would come in for a week or two, then you go back and write.
That's right.
Then come in for another couple weeks, and we do that like 3 or 4 times, and that was the record.
Yep. And it was such fun.
When I started, I'd have a 2-track reel-to-reel,
Right.
and I'd have 2 other 2-track reel-to-reels with elements, a cart machine, records, and you would have to try to do the mix on the fly, and you screw up. I really do love it the way it is now, because now I can absolutely do precision, perfect timing.
Oh, it's great.
Work. I love that part of it. And also, you can do it all by yourself now, which is not necessarily a great social attribute, but it's very productive.
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. I mean, it's great if you're doing it, you're self-produced, but when you got somebody looking over your shoulder
Yeah.
and trying to tell you what to do, and you've got to keep manipulating things to death, and especially when you're dealing, let's say, with a singer who can't sing. So you at some point you stop doing takes and you start doing pitch shifting, and unfortunately the pitch shifting doesn't sound that natural.
Yeah.
The more you have to
We're
do a
almost
pitch,
beginning.
Well, what
Yeah,
happened?
exactly.
So how did you handle if somebody came in and they just sucked?
I would tell them,
Pay me in
you're
advance.
doing fine. You're doing fine. It's very ambitious. What you're doing is very ambitious. I would never lie to them and say they were great. I had a couple of people say, so what do you think? And I would always say the same thing. I've worked with people much worse than you, and I've worked with some people better than you. And that was the pat answer.
When you go
And
backstage,
that-
You have a unique sound.
yeah, you have a unique sound. Right.
When
That's
you go
it.
backstage and you didn't particularly like the performance of a friend, you say, well, that was interesting.
Very interesting.
Very interesting
So
performance.
it was there was some political aspects of it that you had to deal with.
And you recorded some ska bands.
I recorded some great ska bands,
I love
especially
ska.
especially Hepcat. I did
Yeah.
2 albums at Sunburst with Hepcat, a well-known ska band, and a 3rd album that I produced for them out of Sunburst in another studio. They were just wonderful guys, and unfortunately, one of the lead singers, Greg Lee, has passed away fairly recently, which is very sad. Yeah. Another record that, of course, I did that still is pretty well known today is Cocktails with Joey Altruda, and it's basically a big band, but all done with individual players, all individual.
Layered?
Yeah, all layered.
Because you didn't
And
have
it
a big
sounds-
space for a...
No, and it
it's a
sounds
small-
like a
fairly
20
small studio, yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like a 25-piece band.
Wow.
And we were fortunate to get one of our cuts into the movie Swingers, and I got a gold record because the
Hey!
song's on there, and it sits up in my office.
And you won another award recently, a Grammy for what?
Well, I won a Grammy for George Carlin,
Oh,
and that
isn't
was
that great?
back a few years. That was for piano recording that I did with him. So we did bumpers between his comedy bits.
Oh.
And that was a lot of fun. And 2 finalist nominations for Firesign Theatre.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Out of our 3 Grammy
Two-
nominations.
That's right. So that's another thing that's up in my wall,
Yeah.
Great memories, great memories.
Yeah, me too.
Do you miss the studio?
No. I don't. I had enough of it. I did enjoy it very fully, and I'm glad I got all this down before I'm too senile to remember it.
This is a beautiful
So-
book you put together.
Oh, thank you.
Now, you were in Culver City forever
Yeah.
before it also completely changed, hasn't it, in the last
Correct.
20 years?
Yeah, I mean, things started changing when NPR opened up there. And
Yes.
Then, of course, the housing market changed, and it got very gentrified.
Yep.
And that's how I finally lost my studio because my rent went sky high.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't afford to have it
happening all over the
independent.
city.
Yeah, I couldn't have an independent business like I had at the rate that I could charge. It just
Right.
didn't work. I'd have to become a lawyer, that's all. And have 7 lawyers work for me in little desks. Then I could afford the absorbent rent.
You're getting out of town.
Well,
You're a lifelong LA.
I'm a lifelong LA guy. And I think I want the peace and quiet of a small town.
Yeah.
I love Culver City, but
What?
I've had enough.
Where are you going to find a small town?
Port Townsend, Washington.
Okay, yes, where
Yeah.
Paul Magid of the Flying Karamazov Brothers has his compound, and I'll
Yeah,
connect
and
you
will
up.
connect, and
I'll
also
connect you
where
up to
David
that.
Osmond lives very close
He
because
does,
he's on
that's
Whidbey
right,
Island.
Whidbey Island. But
Nice.
one thing I wanted to touch on the few minutes we have left. How's your hearing?
Huh?
What?
Yep. Working in the industry was one of the reasons that my hearing started to deteriorate.
Yeah.
But you have a story. You
Well-
have some tinnitus, which in one ear, which came from what?
It came from a leopard attack.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, in the minute we have,
How?
I was invited into a leopard cage, right?
and you went.
How
And I
every day.
went
And you
because the
went.
trainer said, "Come on in and take a picture of this
Sure.
leopard.
Yeah.
He's friendly. He's domesticated." And all I can say about it is he wasn't. He was not domesticated, and I got attacked. And my dad,
12 years old.
I was a
20.
little old. I was
20.
about 20.
Oh, 20, I
Yeah, I
meant
was in
20.
college, and my dad rushed into the cage, pulled the leopard off me, threw it aside, and both of us ran out of the cage.
Wow.
Bob Wayne, thank you so much.
You're
Your book,
welcome.
Reel to
Good to
Reel
see you,
Tales.
Bob.
I'm Ted Bonnet.
I'm Phil Proctor.
You've been listening to Phil and Ted's Sexy Boomer Show. Hear all of our shows on our website at sexyboomershow.com. We'll be back next week. See you then.